This is Nina Serrano for Literary Dialogs with Nina Serrano. I'm your host, Nina Serrano. My guest today is the prolific and learned poet, editor, and translator John Curl. He has 12 published books of his poetry. His latest, Rainbow Weather, Poems for Environmental Healing, was published in 2022 by Vagabond Press. He's also published 2 novels. He's the author and curator of Indigenous Peoples Day, a documentary history of how the new holiday replaced Columbus Day. He's a member of the Revolutionary Poets Brigade and represented the United States at the World Poetry Festival in Venezuela in 2010. Welcome, John Curl. Today, we'll be speaking about his new translations of Mayan poetry. Welcome, John.
Oh, thank you, Nina. I'm very pleased to be here today.
So, my informant, Google, tells me that there are over 200 Mayan languages. How do you translate Mayan poetry?
Oh, I mean, you're talking about dialects. I mean, there are officially 23 Mayan languages, or 21 and 23. The experts disagree, but and then the rest are just variations. You know, a lot of the world is like that. You know, in the indigenous world and the traditional world, you can go to a lot of places in Asia and even in Europe, where every village speaks a slightly different dialect. In the south of Italy, every village speaks a different dialect, and it's the same with the Mayas. Like in Yucatan, since it's a large area, everyone speaks the same language. But most of this is like up in the mountains of Guatemala, where every each village, a lot of them are isolated in different parts of the mountains. And over time, you develop a different dialect, and in enough time, it becomes a different language. Just like people, there's the line between the dialects and languages it's a shifting line. But yes, that's why Yucatecan Maya is one of the largest. The two very largest ones are Quiche Maya, which is in Guatemala, or Maya Quiche, and in Yucatan and the Yucatan Peninsula, it's the language they call Mayatan, which is everybody speaks that same language there.
So, what countries do you consider as part of the world of Mayan poetry?
It's mostly southern Mexico and Guatemala, and a little bit in Honduras and Belize. That's populations have moved around. A lot of the Mayas are now in Belize, used to live in the mountains of Guatemala, and they a group of them moved down there. But that's what the Mayas have always been doing there. That's why they would build cities or build towns, and then they live there for a while, and then they go somewhere else. So that's still happening today.
So how did you select these poems to be translated?
These poems in 1980, around 1980, I was traveling in Yucatan, and I picked up a little book called the Book of the Songs of Zipalche, which contains many of the oldest recorded poems and songs in the Mayan language. And through that, it was written down in the early 1700s by handwritten in a book, and I became interested in trying to hear what they sounded like, because poetry, at least as we practice it here in the Bay Area and internationally now, it's spoken. It comes from the spoken word, so I couldn't really just by translating the meanings of the words, you can you can translate poetry as if it's prose, but it's not prose. It's poetry, which has a very special connection between the music of the language. So in order to translate these poems, I had to learn the language or learn enough of it so that I could, so that I was able to, hear the language and doing that with these poems that were well over 300 years old. Then that got me into the modern language because every language changes over time. The language we're speaking today is very different than the language they spoke here 300 years ago, and it's the same in Yucatan and in the Mayan world. So I was starting out by translating or trying to be able to read poems that were written down in alphabetic Mayan 300 years ago, and that got me into modern Mayan. And then I realized I started to learn that there are many living contemporary Mayan poets who are really excellent, and Mayan poetry is really thriving today. And so I have some old things and some old new things that I want to read today. That some contemporary living Mayan poets, really excellent poets, and then some poets from shortly after the Spanish conquest, when things were first written down in alphabetic Mayan.
Well, I'm anxious to hear this.
Well, okay. So some of the most important Mayan poets today are Briseida Cuevas Cobb, who's a woman poet, Jorge Cocompech, Gregorio Vasquez Canche, Doni Limber de Atoche Prito Mai, and Valdemar Notzek. And I'll read some poems by those contemporary poets, and then later on I'll go back a few hundred years, and read some poems from the songs of Zit Balche, which are in an archaic Mayan. It's not, but I'm reading it in contemporary Mayan as if it's contemporary Mayan, but just as if you read a poem, something from the 1700s or the 1600s, that it would actually sound different than you're actually reading it today. So this is a poem by Briseida Cuevas Cobb, and the poem is about an abandoned village.
Is that the woman poet?
This is the woman poet. I'm going to read actually several poems by her because she's really good. This one is called The Owl. Shoch. Sok ukuchu shoch. Tu mo tu bal yokot. Tu bol yutukul. Mashken utumachti wamishmak. Kukin tilekaha. Ushlabaka mako bechen. Ka manakal. Uhe tu bonik. Umuchna lila ochen kash, sok ukachel lukul tumen lobil, joshche tu shushubtik ukachil kushtal, tu in ma ukai ukimil. It's the owl. The owl arrives. He crouches on the wall. Meditate. What death is there to announce if no one still lives in the town? Fossils of the people are in transit to nowhere. The moon paints the graves of the cemetery that has begun to chew the weeds. The owl rehearses a song to life. He refuses to foretell his own death. And obviously that poem comes from in Yucatan, when the Mayas, the owl is when the owl appears, it's a sign that someone's going to die. So that's what, so a lot of these poems are full of culture where, like any poem, any poetry is, where you kind of, if you understand the cultural connections that are going on, you get a much deeper understanding of the poem. So that's one poem, and then I'll read. This is another poem by a poet named Jorge Cocompech called "The House of Your Soul." Unachia la pishan, atane unachia la pishan. Tu menti kushan alatzilao, tie uchben shanil nach, tush kukosal, atachalil, atipatal, atan. The house of your soul. Your language is the house of your soul. There live your parents and grandparents. In that millennial house, home of your remembrances, your language remains. Because of this, do not cry over the death of your body. Do not cry for the death of your soul. Your body continues in the faces of your children. Your soul remains forever in the brilliance of the stars.
Thank you.
Here's another poem by Briseida Cuevas Cobb. It's called The Wine of the Dog in Its Existence. Dog, do not abandon your owner. Dog, do not bite your master. Dog, may you love your master. Lend your tongue to the man so that his drool drains too, like yours, and wets the earth, and sows, like you, the understanding of existence. Lend your eyes to the man so that he can see with your sadness. Lend your tail to the man so that he wags it with joy, so that he keeps it between his feet with your shame. Lend him your nose to sniff out the goodness that only exists in the hands of the child. Anyway, lend him your fangs so that his conscience bites. Black, white, yellow, brown, spotted, common dog, foreign dog, they all have the same heart. But you only buy food for the breed dog. Then you kick the common dog with contempt. You think he walks after you because of the bone you don't throw at him? Don't you know that this dog is the death that walks after your bones?
Thank you.
This is a poem called by Gregorio Vasquez Conche called Night Voices. He's another contemporary poet. From the east came pain. Through the long night, accomplice of whirlpools and crazy times that wither the flower of the Maya land. Sons of the sun and the new fire, ideas turned into copal ashes, agonies that play with life, sages who outwitted death, spirits that travel trails wet with tears and sweat, tracing footprints of pain of bare and tired feet. In the hidden villages they wait, the rebellion of the nocturnal writings, the rebellion of the hidden voices in cenotes, caves, and hills. In the center of the earth they wait. The power of the word lives, its return into memories, words that give us freedom. Mutilated saber tree of mine, in your roots sprouts the living word. In your shoots flourish the living script. In your fruits the rope of life lives. In your times lives our time.
Thank you. That seems like a protest poem.
Yeah, no, it is. It is a protest poem in its own way. This is another protest poem. This is again by the woman poet Briseida Cuevas Cobb. And this is called My Name. And this is a heavy poem. My name is dried skin, leather bitten from mouth to mouth, chewed by the fangs of people. I have stripped myself of the clothing of my name as the snake sheds its skin. Why don't they call the moon a prostitute. She is accustomed to walk at night. She is used to hiding her shame. She is used to plunging into darkness because she already hates her clarity, because she is a beautiful white vermin. Now I no longer have a name. I am a spirit that stirs the hair of love.
Thank you. How do you see that as a protest poem?
Well, she's taking a, the poets, they don't always write when they say I, when they speak in the first person, they're not always speaking about, they're speaking of their own personal experience, but through others. Poets tend to be able to get into other people, and in this, in this poem, it's a protest poem because she's putting herself, she's speaking as if she's someone, in this case, a woman. In case she's putting herself into the persona of a prostitute, and she's and she's comparing herself to the moon, and it's only a it's only a protest poem in the sense that when we are able to empathize with all kinds of people, with all people, with the pain of people, she's sharing this pain in order to for a greater purpose, to transform the pain through the power of poetry into something beautiful and something that people can use, and people can can understand, and get deeper into their own lives by sharing the pain. In this case, how society creates shame for makes life is difficult, and society makes it even more difficult for a lot of people.
Thank you. So another poem?
Okay, I was going to read some of these poems from the Songs of Zitbal Che, which were written, they were written in a notebook in the 1700s, and it's the writer, Albam, his title, or his subtitle, was the Book of the Dances of the Ancients, that it was the custom to perform here in the towns when the whites had not yet arrived. So, like, this is a person in the early 1700s who his community collected. It was community traditions of collecting old poetry, and they still perform in Yucatan. And on weekends in the city square, and in a lot of places in Mexico, people put on cultural presentations for themselves. And I've been there where today people in the city square read poetry on weekends, and like hip hop groups too, doing hip hop in the Mayan language, hip hop protest poetry in the Mayan language, which is kind of fun form of poetry, but it's I'm just bringing I said as an example of how poetry is really still a living part of the culture there. So
when you translated this older poetry, did you translate it using modern English or using the English of that time?
Well, I have dictionary. The grammar is not that different. It's very similar. It's almost the same thing, but usage is different. So I have dictionaries. I have old dictionaries. They're very 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 extensive dictionaries where you kind of the words change, the meaning of words changes, so you have to kind of go through it and try to figure out what some, and also the way it's written down changes. Like the English that we have now is very standard, but a few hundred years ago, the early Mayan language was not standard at all. So just but in any case, you have to make those adjustments for changes in language, and it's like this is the on the cover page of the book. It has this one little poem which is "I Will Kiss Your Mouth," and there's some love poems in here, and I'm going to read some. I will kiss your mouth. I will kiss your mouth between the plants of the garden. Beautiful lady, you have to awake. And there are protest songs here also. This is called the mourning song, like mourning, not in the being sad for mourning for death. The mourning song of the poor motherless orphan, dance to the drum beats. I was very small when my mother died, when my father died. I, my Lord, left in the hands and company of friends. I have no family here on earth. I, my Lord. 2 days ago, my friend died and left me insecure, vulnerable, alone. I, that day I was alone and put myself in a stranger's hand. I, my Lord, much evil passes here on earth. Perhaps I will never stop crying. Poor, alone on earth, pleading, insecure, lonely, imploring door to door, asking every person I see to give me love. I, who have no home, no clothes, no fire. I, my Lord, have pity on me. Give my soul transcendence to endure.
Thank you. What a sad poem.
That's a sad one.
Yes.
This next one is a prophetic poem, and there's a lot of, as most of us know, there's a lot of prophetic part of Mayan culture is very involved with prophecy and cosmic consciousness kind of thing. This is called Those Who Build Houses and Temples. Essential to count the Hob years or cartoons that have passed since the great powerful men raised the walls of the ancient cities that we now see here in the province of the plains, all these cities scattered on the earth, here and there, on high hills. Here in the cities, we try to give meaning to what we see today in the skies and what we know. For day to day, at midday, we see in the skies the signs told to us by the ancient people of this land, the ancient people of these villages, here on our earth. Let us purify our hearts so at nightfall and at midnight, from horizon to zenith, we may read the face of the sky.
Thank you.
So that's a selection. I can read some more if we have a little time.
Yes, of course.
Okay, this is another one from the Songs of Zitbalche. This is called Extinguishing the Ancient One on the Mountain. As the sun sinks into the lap of the western sky, the drum beats, the conch trumpets, the singing gourds sound, all people assemble. The acrobats leap as they arrive at the council house of Lord Serpent, where the chief Holpop and the rain priests wait, along with Lord Akulel and his attendants. The minstrels have arrived, the clowns, dancers, contortionists, jumpers, stooped ones, and spectators. All the people have come to see Lord Serpent and the performance in the plaza. As the sun sinks into the lap of the sky, it is the moment to begin. Like the copal, Lord Sky receives the smoke and fire for the face of Father Sun. Then let us go to the trunk of the saber tree to make our offerings for the new year. The painful days are gone. We will reunite in the village. We will go to the east of the village, to the wooden column of the ancestor, the receiver of the fire on the mountaintop. Bring all things new. Throw away all the old. Lord God has granted that the evil days, the last days of the year, which we have passed together here in the village, the evil days have ended, and another day has come another Winalmon, another Hab year, another 20-year cartoon. To complete the count of years for the cartoon, we will erect a new stone to mark its end at the village gate. We will find a white stone and mark the passing of another cycle.
Thank you. The New Year poem.
Yes. And I have one more poem that I brought, which is kind of a love poem. And I thought I'd finish with a love poem. This is called from the songs of Zit Balche. To kiss your lips beside the fence rails. Put on your beautiful clothes. The day of happiness has arrived. Comb the tangles from your hair. Put on your most attractive clothes and your splendid leather. Hang great pendants in the lobes of your ears. Put on a good belt. String garlands around your shapely throat. Put shining coils on your plump upper arms. Glorious you will be seen, for none is more beautiful here in this town, the seat of Zitbalche. I love you, beautiful lady. I want you to be seen. In truth, you are alluring. I compare you to the smoking star because they desire you up to the moon and in the flowers of the fields. Pure and white are your clothes, maiden. Go give happiness with your laugh. Put goodness in your heart because today is the moment of happiness. All people put their goodness in you.
Thank you. Well, this was very, very interesting. So, what general comments would you make about Mayan poetry, old and new? How does it compare with, let's say, modern poetry? Well, modern non-Mayan poetry.
Well, I think modern poetry has caught up to it. It's kind of an international style now, where I've kind of read and been connected with poets from all over the world, and many cultures have their own unique little kind of poetic traditions. But over the years, there has grown a kind of a tradition, an international tradition of poetry, and most poets are, it's the human language. It's there are more similarities. We all have many more similarities than we do differences. But my poetry, well, you go to understand. Most of the Mayan stuff that we get in this country has to do with archaeological discoveries, et cetera, et cetera. That's the information. But there is a very living culture, and there has always been. There is not, the idea that the Mayas were just people who built pyramids a long time ago and then went away is absolutely has nothing to do with the reality. It's a very strong, living culture, and it has one foot in its traditions. It's kept its traditions, very strong traditional culture, and also it's the young Mayan kids. Everybody wants their smartphone, and they're part of the modern world. So they're bringing they're coming into the modern world without giving up their culture.
I didn't hear in the original, at the first early poems when you read in the Mayan language, I didn't hear rhyme.
But assonance, there is, there is. It's not. It's more assonance than rhyme. But there is in the rhythms, in the it does exist. It's not as strong as in English. It doesn't have this long tradition of rhyme in English poetry, which can get to be like sing song, but when it's done well, it just follows the natural rhythms of the English language, and that in Mayan it follows the natural rhythms of the Mayan language, and that does have to do with repetition of sounds and repetition within a rhythmic framework. So it does exist in its own way, but each language is really different in that.
Yes. Well, thank you. What are you going to do with these poems? Are you going to make a book of them?
Um, well, I guess I could. I mean, I have to get in touch with the. I'm in touch with some of these poets, but not all of them. Some of these that I've just kind of gotten text of it, um, but it's just basically for my own use to read to enjoy to enjoy their poetry. I like to find out what to go back to the original languages, and it gives you a insight into the culture, and to and in terms of books, we're books are wonderful, but we are in this electronic world where most people don't get. Most people read a lot. They read a lot, but they read more in the electronic media than they do in an actual book that's in your hand. So it's kind of to publishing now. It's complicated because you want to get to people who are interested in what you're doing, and but sure, some form. I would like to do some form of a book, but it's not it's a back burner project.
Yes, you have so many projects going, and you have been credited with helping to have created Indigenous Peoples Day.
Well, that is true. I was one of the original people who got that started, and it kind of took off after a while. We were doing it for like 20 years before it really took off. But yeah, that's it's a real good example of how a very small group of people can get something started, and it takes on a life of its own, and it's really has become a national and international holiday in place of what used to be the celebration of colonialism and imperialism in Columbus Day, because Indigenous Peoples Day reflects the values that of the future, the values that we need to promote, and that we need to get to, that we need to start living by, if we're not going to just destroy the whole world. So Indigenous Peoples Day really just spoke to a lot of people and speaks to a lot of people, because we are we're in a very dangerous transitionary period where the whole world is falling off this gigantic cliff, and yet the answer is really not that different. It's just like it's living differently, living in sustainable, life affirmative ways, rather than just murdering each other like like we've been doing. Pick up the newspaper in any newspaper the last 100 years, and people are just murdering each other all over the place, and we can't live that way anymore. It's if we want the planet, and if we want human beings and society and life to survive, we have to learn from the indigenous people who have been living that way for since time immemorial, and look to them as our role models, and not some of the people that are put forth for young people as as what they should use as role models.
What community do you feel is interested in this Mayan poetry?
Well, there's a group here in the Bay Area called Asociación Mayab, which was Mayab is the Maya land, and it's an association of Mayan immigrant people, and they actually about 20 years ago they had a little course in the Mayan language. That's where I first kind of just in San Francisco, and they it was mainly for the young people of the community, like people like second generation immigrant people who they wanted their kids to learn Mayan, because they were learning English, they weren't learning Mayan. So the association, the Mayan Association, had a kind of a course, mostly focused on young people, but people like me could come to it also. So that was the first time that I really connected with the spoken language, and then I also went down to Quintana Roo, which is part of Yucatan, the southern part of the Yucatan Peninsula. That I went to a language school there called Naatic, where I was learning conversational Mayan. Well, there is a big Mayan community, of immigrant Mayan community here in the Bay Area, and they just had a cultural event where I was reading this poetry. They were reading. There were different other people, local people were reading. They had two workshops. They had two. This was at San Francisco City College about a month ago, where we had in this kind of, it's like it was a cultural event, and it was it had a lot of different things in it. And one of the things was Mayan poetry, and I was doing one of the workshops, and Mayan people, and there are quite a few young Mayan people writing poetry right here in the Bay Area, and so there were we had two poetry readings, with mostly Mayan people and me and a few other people, and that was just like a month ago here at San Francisco City College.
So Mayan poetry is a very active thing, both in Latin America and even here in California.
Yes, it is in Latin America and California. And some of these poets, they go around to different festivals. There are a lot of indigenous. It's not just the Mayas. There's a whole world of indigenous poetry, and many poets in many indigenous languages there are international festivals, and throughout Mexico there are international indigenous language festivals, like every year there are gatherings of poets from different native languages in Mexico and Central America, and it's not a small thing. And also people in colleges there, in colleges in Mexico, the colleges that the native people go to, that's kind of what they teach. A lot of people, just like in a university or in a community college. Maybe it's more the equivalent of a community college here. But yeah, I mean, they teach poetry, and they teach and people study it. They do the same things in little community college towns in Latin America, just like little college towns here, where poetry is you get involved with the poetry of your language and the culture. So there is and Mayan people are very much into their culture. It's not like they're throwing away their culture to come into the modern world, but they're bringing it with them, and poetry and other forms of culture, music, painting. There's a lot of folk painting that goes on in the Mayan world, and it's very powerful, and it's a very, very strong cultural force that is still going on.
Well, your translation of Mayan poetry certainly contributes to the appreciation of indigenous peoples. Thank you so much for sharing your work.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here, Nina.
It's always a pleasure.